Most fans agree that The Walking Dead's pilot, Days Gone By, is one of the best pilots ever made in television history. Now, I could sit and gush about this pilot all day. I love how it introduces us to this new world, how we see it through Rick's confused eyes. All the horror elements are just brilliant, and some of the cinematography is just breathtaking. But no, today what I thought would be more interesting is to compare the original script to the pilot itself and see what differences there are between the two. Now, I'm known, not really known, but you might know me as the guy who does all the deleted scene videos. And this was something that I've wanted to do for a long time. And oh my god, I'm so annoyed that I kept it this long, because holy shit, there are some crazy lore drops in the script that if they were in the show would have been completely like lore-shattering. So let's get into it, but first off, I just have a few rules. There are quite a few dialogue changes between the script and the pilot that are not that significant, so I won't be mentioning all of these. There's also sometimes like a position of a shot that's described differently in the script than what we see in the pilot. Some shots are arranged differently. Sometimes there's like stuff described in the background of a scene that we don't get to see on screen. Again, I'm not going to be mentioning anything that's not that significant, so just keep that in mind. So to start off with, we have the very first scene. In the script, there's interior shots of the fuel gauge, and we kind of get this pan view of Rick. We don't have that in the show. We simply get the shot of the cruiser pulling up and then Rick getting out of it. There's no interior shots of the cruiser. Then we get the scene with Rick and the little girl, Walker. Now in the script, there's a little bit more dialogue that Rick says to her before the reveal. And also, what's really interesting about the script is it doesn't end with the shot of Rick's face and then we cut to the opening credits like in the show. No, what we actually get in the script is a bunch of walkers suddenly begin ambling towards Rick. And this will come back later on as we actually cut back to this scene in the script, which is really interesting. So stay tuned for that, but we'll get to that when we get to that part of the script. Next up, we have the scene pre-apocalypse with Rick and Shane chatting the shit in their cruiser. Now, in the script, there are a few dialogue changes than what we've got in the show, but on top of that, there's almost like this reveal in the script where we're not meant to see that Shane's partner is Rick. It's meant to be like, hey, here's the guy from the teaser. And look, he's looking a little bit better than he was before. Obviously in the show, how they do it is we open with the shot of the radio and the food that they're nibbling on, and then we kind of cut to both of them, so there's no reveal in the show. We're just giving that information straight away. Lambert Kendall, who is one of Rick's colleagues, has the following line of dialogue in the show.
Dispatch Unit 1, Unit 3, we are 1097 in Code 100, Highway 18, EB of Interstate, please advise.
However, in the script, although slightly different, this line was actually one of Rick's, so Lambert stole it. Just so this next part makes sense, obviously the criminals who Rick and his colleagues end up shooting at were previously being chased by the Lyndon County deputies. Now, Lyndon County is presumably a county that neighbours King County, and in the script, Leon questions if they'll even get here, but Rick defends them by saying they will. Those Lyndon County boys are good. Carter and those guys, they'll steer them right to us. Ooh, we get a little name drop to one of the officers. One of the officers is called Carter. Cool. This chase scene was also meant to be a little bit more elaborate. For example, there was a chopper that was meant to be trailing the criminal's car. When the criminals did crash, Shane was meant to be on a loudspeaker saying, "In the car, if you can hear me, do not resist or we will open fire. An ambulance has been called and it's on the way." And there's also a little bit of a dialogue exchange between Rick and Shane before the criminals crash regarding Laurie not particularly liking Rick's profession. Now let's cut to the hospital. In the show, Shane names two girls who work in dispatch, Linda and Diane. However, in the script, he just says the girls in dispatch. Shane's grandmother's name is different too. In the show, Rick says Grandma Jean.
Fess up. You steal it from your Grandma Jean's house.
However, in the script, it's Dale. I'm pretty sure they literally just changed this because they have a character called Dale later on in the script, so that makes sense. After getting matches from the little nurses station in the hospital, Rick was meant to go back to his room and put his pants on and find a card that had been written by Carl. The card would read, "Dear Daddy, we miss you, get well soon and come back home. I love you, Carl." And this card comes back later on in the script, so keep it in mind. So you know the famous "don't open dead inside" doors, right? Well, in the script, there was no inside. It was just, "don't open dead." So, that's pretty funny. So in the show, Rick heads into this very dark stairwell and he uses the matches that he acquired to find the door. However, there's an additional part in the script. After smelling something pretty horrific, he ends up dropping the last match down to the lower levels of the hospital, where it would have hit a pile of dead bodies, all just dumped in the stairwell. All of these people were executed, most likely by the military, and their bodies were just piled up in the hallways. Crazy. This was obviously meant to add to the horror and explaining what had happened with the military executing people, but to be fair, I think it's pretty evident just by the amount of bodies in the parking lot alone, so I don't think they needed the stairwell bodies too. There's actually no helicopters in the script. In the show, we see a bunch of abandoned helicopters, but that's not in the script, which is weird because sometimes the script is over-detailed and we don't get to see that stuff in the show. But this is an example where the show is actually more detailed than the script. Before Rick finds the bike, he was actually meant to try and start a few cars, but he is unsuccessful. In the show, we just simply see him walking and finding the bike straight after leaving the hospital. One of my favourite scenes in the pilot is Rick's breakdown when he realises that the world is over and he's like shouting for Laurie and Carl and is this real? Is this real? Yeah, that fucking amazing breakdown is not in the script. It simply cuts from Rick finding his house all dishevelled and abandoned to him walking out to the porch. I don't know if this was something they just came up with on the day of shooting, but holy shit, I'm so glad they did, because without that scene, it would have been weird. This next one is so minor, but I do think it would have helped with the realism. You know, Rick has just come out of a coma, so Morgan was meant to help Rick out of the bed after freeing the restraints that are on his wrists. Like, I know he's been up and about anyway, but he's just gone from being in a coma to being knocked out by Dwayne. I expect him to be a little not great on his feet is all. In the show, Rick's neighbours are the following.
This place. Fred and Cindy Drake's.
Morgan is occupying Fred and Cindy Drake's house, of course, but in the script they're called Fred and Sally Werner. Remember the whole bodies in the stairwell thing at the hospital? Well, Rick was meant to mention that to Morgan here, so it was meant to reoccur. A piece of dialogue that's omitted from the script to the screen is Morgan talking about the news. He says the following. They were saying on the news some kind of virus. They were guessing. There was a whole lot of that going on. All those experts looking scared down to their socks. Then the broadcast stopped. That's the last we heard. That was a few weeks ago. So giving us a bit of a time frame there. Now remember that get well card that Carl had written for Rick that he would have found in his hospital ward? Well, Morgan was meant to bring that up. At the start of the video, I promised a crazy lore drop. And that's what we're going to get onto next. And I'm so surprised that more people haven't talked about this, because this is fucking insane. So in the show, we see Rick leaving the house with his baseball bat, and he gets his first Walker kill. Now, looking at the script, the scene is pretty much the same. However, in addition, there's meant to be another body on the street, another Walker, but this one is for real dead. It's a small female who's been torn apart and eaten. And then a little later in the script, Rick looks at the female lying eaten in the street and throws a questioning look to Morgan. Morgan then would say, if they don't find fresh, they'll eat one of their own. Take one of the weaker ones. What? That was meant to be in the script? walkers do attack each other. That's crazy, man. I read that and I was like, wait, what the fuck? Imagine if that was in the show. I don't think we would have an apocalypse anymore because the walkers would have just ended up attacking each other. But obviously, this is not canon. This was definitely retconned. This isn't true. A small little piece of dialogue that was omitted from the show that was in the script was when Morgan leaves, he mentions how a herd of walkers once almost turned over his and Dwayne's car, foreshadowing the threat of what a herd can do. And we'll see that later on in the episode. But with a horse, not a car. Dwayne and Morgan were meant to witness Rick putting down Leon, and we were meant to, I guess, kind of see their reactions, but we don't see how they react in the show. There's a missing shot that's in the script, not in the show, where Dwayne and Morgan are pulling up in their vehicle to the house that they're occupying, and they pass Rick's house. But instead, we just simply cut to Morgan and Dwayne hammering in planks. Morgan takes out 2 walkers before he sees Zombie Jenny in the show, but in the script he only takes out 1. And also something that's in the show and not in the script is Jenny kind of backs away, almost like she knows Morgan doesn't have the guts to put her down. That was not in the script, that was added to the show. But I do think it's an interesting touch. Jenny is like the most intelligent walker there is. Honestly, we should have seen more of Walker Jenny. Amy, the sister of Andrea, is actually called Rachel in the script. Dale is meant to be on the roof of the RV too, but in the show it's this extra, so I'm pretty sure this just confirms that there are 2 Dales in the Atlanta camp. Dale 1, and this man you can see there on the RV, he's Dale 2. Jim was meant to make his debut in this episode, but all of his lines in the script go to Dale instead in the show. Shane and Laurie's exchange in the tent is actually a little bit longer in the TV show, but it's nothing that significant. So following this, we were meant to follow up with the scene of Rick at the gas station, looping back to the teaser. So after Rick puts Summer down, a bunch of the dead in the vehicles suddenly come to life and they begin to chase Rick. He then pegs it back up towards his police car and drives away just in the nick of time. I don't think the episode loses much without this, but I do think it would have been good for 2 reasons. A, it would have been nice to loop back to the teaser so we are fully aware, chronologically, where it takes place. But B, it's just nice foreshadowing for later on, when a bunch more walkers are going to be chasing Rick. But this time, he can't escape. The horse Rick finds is a girl in the script, but it's a boy in the show. I know I wasn't mentioning little dialogue changes, but this one just stood out to me. When Rick sees the state of Atlanta, he was meant to say, "Holy God." Rick is just silent in the show, and I much prefer that. I think the line's kind of cringe. Also, the way that Atlanta's destruction is described, I think I expected more. It's like skyscrapers that have burnt down. The picture that we see painted in the show is just not the same as the picture painted in the scripts. Again, pause and have a little read. To me, I don't think it translates as well. I imagine the budget probably played a big part of that. And finally, the only other significant difference is in the show, we have way more shots of Rick riding the horse through the city, but in the script, it gets to the meat and potatoes of what's about to happen pretty damn quickly. And there we have it. Those are all the significant changes between the Walking Dead's pilot script and the Walking Dead pilot itself. Let me know what you think was the craziest reveal here. Did you learn something new? Yeah, put all that stuff down in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe and like and all that, and thank you to channel members. We've got Baddie, Josh Jordan, August Fisher, Austin Mann, Jesus, Logan Keeley, Jack Sokel, Charles, Nova, Gamer J, Tyler B, Beatleaf TTV, Ralph Farha, Nostostix 212, Carl Grimes is my man, True Paranormal, Scottish Scrub, and Jagson9. Oh wait, and Straight Outta Christ, the YouTube TV show, Corey, Mike Games. And then a huge shout out to these legends. We've got Coda Call, Whatever Comes to Mind, Gavin Kelly, Z Fungi 148, Turbo Class G, and Red Lemon Cola. Absolute legends. Cheers.
Shay, you in the jar?